You're listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast, coming to you from the Kitchen Studios, located high atop the historic Raleigh building, located in the heart of downtown Raleigh. The NC F&amp Podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFBPod. This episode is sponsored in part by Food Scene. That's foodseen.com. Providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. That's Food Scene. And now, the sommeliers to the stars, the barbacks in your backyard. It is Max and Matt.
Hello, and thank you for listening to a special episode. Oh, I'm so hoarse today. A special episode of the NC F&amp Podcast. I'm your host, Max Trujillo. Matthew is in the air in France as we speak, coming back from an amazing wine trip. But I'd like to set the scene for my experience buying a bottle of liquor in North Carolina. Let's cut to December 24th, Christmas Eve, just recently. I'm standing in a line of about 25 North Carolinians outside of an ABC store. It's cold, it's crowded, and I got to get home in time for my friends and family. I need to get a bottle of my favorite bourbon and gin for the drinks I'm making tonight. After about 15 minutes, I'm let in by an armed police officer at the door on the left side of the building. Not the right, because that's the outdoor. The place is totally packed. I go to the bourbon section first, and I grab my $20 bottle of Four Roses. It's made in Kentucky. It's delicious, by the way. And it's stocked with 3 facings. That means 3 rows of all of this $20 product. Now on to get my gin. Gin, it's a specific thing. It can vary from the traditional London Dry with that black pepper finish, or a Genever with that malty, almost whiskey-like finish, to like my West Coast styles that have the cucumber-forward botanicals. But I want what I want, and I'm in the triangle of North Carolina, so I want my Durham Distillery Navy Strength Conniption Gin. It's balanced. Juniper aromas are reminiscent of a quality Hendrick's gin, but here's the kicker. It's Navy Strength, so it's also 114 proof. Yeah, that's what I want. Local, strong, delicious. So I head to the gin section to scan it all across the wall. No conniption. Not even their American Dry label, the other label they have. I get to thinking, oh, I bet it's in the North Carolina section because all the ABC stores put everything on that wall instead of just mixing it in with all the other liquors. In the North Carolina section, I see the place where it once was located. It's just an empty facing where my beloved Conniption Navy Strength gin once proudly sat on the shelf. They were out. And my first thought was, well, good for Melissa and Lee, the owners, who are good friends of mine, because they sold out around Christmas time. Yay for them. And because I'm friends with them, I took a picture of the empty space and texted it directly to them and said how bummed I was, but good for them. I received a quick text message back from Melissa Katrinzik, the owner of Durham Distillery, in which she tells me that they've been out for 10 days. 10 days! Do you remember this story takes place in the holiday season, one day before Christmas, right? This is when everybody buys liquor. And the ABC store didn't restock their #1 rated craft gin in America by USA Today for the busiest time of the year. Why? Why, you might ask? Why wouldn't you restock an item that sells? The ABC is a business just like any other. So why isn't there more need to fill its shelves? I'll tell you. Competition. There is no competition to be better than the next business because guess what? There's no other business. The ABC is the only game in town. It's essentially a monopoly. And I'm not going to throw a bunch of shade at just our state, but has anyone ever been to a government-run establishment and left thinking to themselves, wow, such great customer service and selection, short lines and great attitudes. I can't wait to write a positive Yelp review when I get home. The truth is, an ABC store has the same feel as shopping at an adult bookstore. Everybody keeps their head down, as if they were ashamed of their tendency to imbibe on a spirit, every now and then. Armed guards, regulated entrances, and DMV-like staff members. Why is our state-run liquor system so wrong? And that's why we're here today, and what I'd like to discuss. With me in studio is local business owner Gentry Lassiter of Lassiter Distilling out there in Knightdale, and Leigh Tauss, a writer for Indy Week and the author of the amazingly honest article, Buzzkill. North Carolina's craft spirits are ready to take off like craft beer did a decade ago, unless the ABC Commission gets in the way. Welcome, Leigh and Gentry.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to like 12 minutes of me just rant about something. But I wanted to paint the picture because not everyone buys booze. Not everyone lives in North Carolina. And even if you do, not everyone gets the subtlety of the differences in this state compared to the rest of the country. So just kind of wanted to paint that picture. Leigh, when was the last time you bought booze at the ABC?
Oh, geez. It was probably around Christmas. Ironically, I wrote most of this article while doing a dry January, which I've also recently learned through doing this article actually really hurts a lot of small businesses here because they actually do see that impact. But yeah, I think I went and I was like, and I knew that I was kind of going to do this article, so I went looking for that shelf. And it was hard to find it. It was like in the back of the store.
You mean the North Carolina
shelf? The
North
Carolina shelf. I was like, yeah, where are these products? And, somebody had joked to me. They're like, oh, yeah, the moonshine section. And, it is kind of bizarre that, there's a bunch of moonshine and then there's a couple other products. And it's just a really small space for, what I discovered through reporting this article is a really fast-growing niche, this world of craft spirits here.
Yeah, it's crazy. What, Gentry?
Yeah, the North Carolina section's been something that we've dealt with for quite a while, and I think it was one of those things that I think was a good idea in theory, and I think it was legitimately meant to be supportive. But customers don't shop that way. They go to the section that they're looking for, and so shoving a whole bunch of different things that fit different categories into one section, nobody ever goes there and they never find us. What we find is they shop the category but not the store. And so we've been kind of having discussions with legislators and the ABC to see if we can get that changed, but it's something that is still kind of in the works here. And I should probably come out and say the experience you laid out, Max, is unfortunately not atypical, but it's not 100% that way in all stores. There are a lot of ABC boards that are run very well, and we enjoy partnering with those folks, and they're our biggest customers. So I feel like some of those I have to defend. Yeah, there are some good actors in the
Gentry,
in the
I get
marketplace.
it. You got stake in this game because the only way you make money is if the one client in this state, the ABC Commission, buys your product. So I'll totally not drill you on having any negative feelings because it's where your bread is buttered. But my bread does not get buttered there, and so I'm going to call it like I see it. When was the last time that we sub-labeled anything, whether it's race or religion or sex, where it was so cool to be put out like, oh, he did a good job for a handicapped person. No, a handicapped person just wants to be in the same category as everyone else and just say, he did a good job. Or she's a great female business owner. It's like, she's just a great business owner. So it's saying your rum, your amber rum from Nightdale is a good North Carolina rum. It's kind of placating what you do in a business.
Yeah, that's how we feel with the North Carolina section. Again, I think it's a good idea in theory. Practice didn't really work out.
Right, it has good intention.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but I think the other thing is that when you look at the other option, which is complete privatization with no room, no shelf reserved for North Carolina products, I think that, with the distillers I talked to, that's also pretty scary. I mean, the general vibe that I got from most people is although the system is very, very flawed, it's better than the alternative for them.
Which is what?
Which is, a licensee system where, the corporations, I mean, one of the things too is I don't think many people realize is almost everything that you drink, for the most part, is made by like 4 major companies that basically control the industry. And that if you go private right away, that those companies are going to buy up all the liquor stores and just monopolize it. And where will that leave room for, craft distillers? At least here, they have that shelf. People might not know where it is, but, they have a foot in the door. Going to complete privatization, I think, scares a lot of these small business owners because, they just can't compete financially with those titans.
Now, I was a liquor rep in Los Angeles working for Southern Wine & Spirits, the largest distributor. It's now like Southern Glazer, but they're the largest national brand. They represent everybody. And I remember talking to somebody not that long ago who still works for Southern. He's a friend of mine. It was kind of off the record. We were just talking on the phone. And I said, Southern out here in North Carolina isn't really as relevant. No offense to my friends that work there, but they're not like dominant the way it is in California, where, I mean, everywhere you look, there's a Southern rep doing something. They're always in every liquor store. They're always in every restaurant peddling their wares. And he's like, well, it's because you're a control state. And right now we have one client, and they buy all of our product, and they buy a good amount of it, but we don't need to spend any time and effort there. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for us, so we don't really care. It's never going to be a ton, but it's also never going to be a little. So we just kind of put all of our efforts forth in Florida and in South Carolina and in California and in New York, where you have much more flexibility and you can really dive in. But he said, but we've all been in these meetings talking about national. As soon as North Carolina lifts that ban, or that lifts the regulation, oh, we're going in there hardcore, and we're going to knock them all out. We're going to knock everybody out. So I think that there is some proof in that. There is a little bit of fear of saying, if we go completely privatized and now everybody owns a liquor store in town, I don't think it's going to lead to the things that most people are, fearing. These God-fearing people that are saying, "Oh, it's going to create a lot of drunks and alcoholism and more violence, and it's Lord's Sunday and we can't drink on these days." I don't think that has anything to do with it. It's all economics. It's all about the system of how it's built, the cushy jobs that are there now, and these employees are going to work there for 30 years, retire, and have a nice pension, and shaking that up is very scary to a lot of people.
And I think, too, look at what happened with Washington State, which, went from, a controlled state to a, more privatized licensee system in, I think, 2012. And, there were all these fears, like, everybody's going to, be drinking so much more, and there's going to be, twice as many liquor stores. And that was true. There were a lot more liquor stores that opened up. I think it was something like, I think it tripled in the number of liquor stores that were in the state. But what didn't happen is people weren't actually drinking anymore. And part of that might be because the price of alcohol actually skyrocketed. Because now, instead of having, one state, one player that basically takes their cut and then it's on the shelf, you have all of these other players that are acting as middlemen, the distributors, you have you have the actual retailer, and then the state has to make up all the revenue that it lost. So that's more taxes. So what Washington State actually saw is the price of alcohol went up. And when the price of something goes up, not as many people are going to be able to buy it. Yeah,
the price went up in Washington for a variety of reasons, raising taxes and those sorts of things too. We're also seeing a national trend of less consumption per year. I think it was IWSR came out with a report, and I think the average gallons per year consumed decreased by, a pretty large percentage. So I've been saying this for a few months now, that privatization doesn't equal proliferation. There are only 17 control states in the United States, and we're not seeing an increase as more states become private. I'm not advocating for private states. Part of that is because I've spent a lot of money figuring out how to make my business work in a private, in a control state environment. But I think some of these arguments against privatization, that consumption will skyrocket, that all these other bad things are going to happen, I don't know if those are actually valid.
And here's a question for you, because I think part of why craft distillers are growing is part of this movement, toward more local premium products that are more unique. And you see this, I'm sure, Max, you see this in the world of food all the time. But do you think that, as people are gravitating more toward premium and local and products that, are a little more special, does that actually mean that they're going to be drinking less of just the name brand stuff on the shelf?
I think.
Can I answer that?
Yeah,
it's no. It's no. So here's an example. When we talk about economy versus alcoholism or alcohol drinking, right? Like I mentioned, I used to sell all this stuff back in the day. And everyone's imbibing on North Carolina liquors right now. I've got some Doc Porters. We got some Lassiter rum in glasses. That's nice. And a little bit of crude bitters inside, topping it off. Speaking to the level of economy and alcohol drinking, back when we had our big financial meltdown in 08 to 09, I was a rep at the time, and I was selling like $1.4 million in my territory, which is Santa Monica, California. It was a lot of booze. But guess what? I still sold 1.4. I think I sold 1.35 the next year when the economic downturn hit. What actually happened was we just stopped selling the premium stuff, but we still sold the same volume amount of things. And if anything, more people drank because people were depressed. They couldn't go out to restaurants, but they could buy a $5 bottle of Barefoot Chardonnay, or they could get their, whatever swill that was on the very bottom shelf of the liquor store. They're still going to buy it. They're just shifting what they're going to buy. No more Lagavulin on the top shelf. Now it's the Evan Williams, wherever you can find a cheap bourbon or so. People are still going to drink no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a little break from the show for a new segment with the Forrest Firm. The Forrest Firm are business attorneys across North Carolina, and Jen Hoverstadt is an attorney within their system. Jen is a good friend of ours. Jen, are you there on the phone?
I am. I'm here. I love talking to you guys.
Everybody has legal questions, especially in the food and beverage industry. So that's why we've provided Jen and the Forrest Firm to help us out. And if you follow us on Instagram at NCFB Pod, we'll put out a post weekly from Forrest Firm and ask a question. It might be the question that we ask Jen on the show. But for starters, Matt, why don't you get us kicked off?
Let's get right into it. I want to pose to you a hypothetical situation. I'm starting out a business, and I am ready to go for my brick and mortar. I need a lease. I need a place. What are some of the things that I should be on a lookout for that identify a space, that make sure that everything is on the up and up?
That's a good question. And it's something that we see on a regular basis with our commercial real estate practice. But the first thing is that you want to be able to understand every single word that's in your commercial lease. Ooh. And if you don't understand every single word in there, you need to make sure that you hire someone who can understand every single word in there, because keep in mind that the lease is offered to you from the landlord. It's always going to be in the landlord's best interest. So you want to make sure you are negotiating the best deal possible for you. And you need to think about things that may not apply to you right now, but could easily apply to you in the next few years. What if you outgrow your space? Can you reassign your lease? Can you sublease it? If, say, you end up having more space than what you actually need, can you rent it out to other people? You also want to see what kinds of fees is the landlord going to charge you, because while it may be a good deal up front, typically we're seeing clauses in there where, after 1 or 2 years and your business is becoming more profitable, the landlord also wants to see benefit from your profitable business. So making sure that you have a commercial real estate attorney look over that lease is going to be imperative from the beginning, because once you get going and once your business is successful, it may be harder to negotiate the best deal possible moving forward.
Wow. I didn't know any of that. You, Max?
Yeah, I could have said the same thing.
Hey, I do have one follow-up question to that. So if I have a Forrest Firm commercial real estate attorney, he or she can essentially rewrite or write those addendums into the lease. Is that correct?
Yes. So what we will do is we will be your representative and talk with the landlord to negotiate those items into your contract. And keep in mind, we see so many commercial real estate contracts come through our office that we know what landlords in North Carolina are willing to negotiate. So it's really in your favor to make sure that you have invested in an attorney who is going to negotiate the best deal possible for you up front, rather than wait until it's too late and you realize something was wrong in the contract to begin with.
That's a good thing we're talking to you. Anybody else listening, if you're in the same situation, you're trying to figure it out, you got to talk to either Jen or anybody over at the Forrest Firm and help yourself out. To learn more about the Forrest Firm and what they can do for you, click the link in our show notes or visit forrestfirm.com/NCFB to request a free consultation for your business. You can also reach them at 877-669-1455. Forrest Firm, business attorneys across North Carolina. Gentry, as a small business owner of a distillery in this area, for one, you have 3 labels. Is that correct?
That's right.
You've got your clear.
Yes, our North Carolina rum is our clear rum. We've got our North Carolina amber rum, and we've got our Romo Cafe.
Right. Now, the Romo Cafe is a coffee-flavored rum. It's delicious. It's not sweet. It's just like a dry, really good mixing rum. Yeah. You can make a lot of cool things with it. It could be an addition to a lot of things. But let's be honest, it's not something that's going to probably be like the driving force of most restaurants' back bar.
Probably not, yeah.
Meaning that it's something you're going to have on your back bar.
It's not a base for a cocktail, I guess.
Right.
It's something that's a modifier.
So
yeah.
we'll use poor old Rum Al Cafe as an example right now.
Silver Award winning from San Francisco, I might add. It's not poor, but
Right. Well, it's new and probably doesn't sell at the same velocity that your North Carolina white, your clear rum would sell. We're talking about the threshold of profit in North Carolina. There's a $5,000 profit threshold in North Carolina, seemingly a small number compared to out-of-state distilleries, which have a much larger number. I think it's
10,000.
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's
Unless
double.
it's vodka, then it's 15,000.
Right, and it's because vodka sells at such a high rate. Doesn't North Carolina, as a control state, have any responsibility of promoting the small business and giving small business a fair chance? I mean, I guess seemingly you'd say, well, because they have a small number, they do. But if the Rum Al Cafe can't hit the $5,000 threshold level, then it cannot be sold in ABC stores unless it's special ordered by the case.
Actually in North Carolina, as the rule stands right now, if it doesn't hit the threshold, it cannot be sold in the state except by special order.
Right. So even at your distillery, right?
I believe that is the case.
No,
yeah.
I think you can. You can sell up to 5 bottles a year direct to consumers.
we
from
can,
it.
but if it's not a listed product, we're not allowed to sell it at the distillery.
That's where the rubber meets the road right there is if the ABC, and this is something that I feel like is a very simple, no-brainer, slam dunk adjustment to the rules that currently stand, is that if the ABC doesn't want to carry it because of the $5,000 profit threshold, then the simple fact should just be any distiller should be able to sell their products at their location without regulation or limitation, meaning the 5-bottle parameters shouldn't be in effect for anything that was delisted, so to speak. Because then that way, if I want to go, if I'm a restaurant owner or just a drinker of coffee-flavored rum, I can go to his distillery and drive out to Nightdale and buy 1, 2, 3, 12 bottles if I'd like. And if a restaurant wants to have it on their back bar, why can't they also drive out to Nightdale and buy 3 bottles? Because the point I was making about your particular Rum Al Cafe is it's not a driver liquor. It's not something that you would ever buy in a case. So when the ABC says you can get it, but you got to buy a case, that is not an answer to the problem.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think the answer to your question is of why is kind of how the state views liquor, and I mean, this is really deeply rooted in this religious morality and the legacy of prohibition. I think in my article, Jonathan Blitz, who owns Mystic Distillery in Durham, said he was having a conversation with an ABC official, and he was like, "Why are we treated so differently?" And they had this great quote, which I think really sums up kind of this, just the attitude that the state has, which is, well, beer is food, wine is sacrament, and whiskey is the devil.
I posted that on our podcast Facebook yesterday, and at the very bottom, I said, quote from your article, and I said, well, then I guess I'll see you in hell.
You know what? I'd rather be in hell if that's where the whiskey is, right?
Yeah, I mean, but right there, we're blurring that line about religion. We're blurring that line about choice and what the viewpoint is. No one should have an opinion on what we should be able to sell. Who cares if you don't like bourbon or you think that it's a bad product for your own personal reasons? I don't like Brussels sprouts, but like if I was in power in the state, I would
create a law to prevent the sale of Brussels sprouts.
Yeah. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush said he didn't like broccoli and he was the president of the United States and he wasn't going to eat broccoli anymore. He didn't make a rule saying no one gets to eat broccoli. Yeah. He just let people do what they want to do.
Well, and I think this is what gets everyone so riled up about this is that it's a very emotional topic for a lot of people. I mean, people have had different experiences with alcohol, but it comes down to personal liberties and whether you believe people should be able to exercise personal liberty. Like Max, you like to go to the liquor store and buy some bourbon every now and then. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to do it on a Sunday. Why shouldn't you be able to do that? Maybe.
Yeah, that's my day off. That's the best day to buy booze.
Some people go to church on Sunday. Some people go to church on Saturday. Some people don't go to church at all. Yeah. What does it matter what day people decide
What's a church?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, like, what's the difference between these products? I mean, like, they're all kind of the same thing. I mean, it's just different forms of the same thing. And like, where are you drawing the line? Like, now you have craft beer. At the alcohol percentage is what of some of these craft beers? Like 15, 16%?
You can get up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what
are
you really...
Port can get north of 20%. And And then you can also have liquor
Grappa,
that gets
too.
down to like, quote unquote liquor. Some of these like flavored, Amaros are as low as 25, 26%. So they're basically 2 or 3% difference between the strongest fortified wine. But because we call one a wine and we call one a liquor.
One is basically the devil.
I can tell you this. Even if I took say I took my rum and I distill it at 150 proof and I take it down and I dilute it down to 1%, where would you guys think that needs to be sold?
Well, where it needs to be or where it would be sold?
Where it would be sold.
It would be sold in the ABC
That's
stores,
right. Yeah,
of course.
1%. Even though it's lower than beer or wine or anything like that. It's the method of manufacture, which makes absolutely no sense.
What would that taste like, a 1%?
It would probably...
Like Bacardi.
Yeah, it would taste horrible.
Oh, man. I want to slip that into a blind taste test sometime. And guess what this is?
You probably wouldn't even be able to detect the alcohol in it. It would just be so
Just
weak.
be like
yeah.
tea. Yeah. We've talked about, and I'd love to know, Leigh, if you have any opinions on this. Asheville just went through. They brought it to their local county's house to talk about not necessarily privatizing, but relaxing some of the laws of the liquor establishments. And one of them was to talk about delivery, right? To talk about the ability to get product from the ABC warehouse to a restaurant or even to a person's home. Now, I want people to understand this because this is something, again, that if you're not in the business, you may or may not know that this is what happens. But every single restaurant, every single bar, every single place that has a liquor license that in North Carolina, once a week possibly, or maybe twice if they're super busy, they have to drive, someone from that place has to drive to the warehouse, the ABC warehouse, and pick up their order and drive it back. And this is all private. These are private citizens that work for a restaurant. I've been that person many times. I've had employees that have been that person many times. They're driving with their own license, their own insurance, their own vehicle, and they're going and picking up alcohol for my location, for my business or whoever's business owns it. Now, that seems a little weird, especially because when I go back to being in California and I was a distributor, we had trucks, and these were like certified drivers. At any point of the afternoon in North Carolina, or any control state for that matter, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of booze in trunks, in cars, all around the state. And I shudder to even say this out loud, because I'm not putting this in the universe. You hear that, universe? I'm not putting this in the universe. But when and if someone got in an accident, possibly even a fatality, on their mission to get booze, whose responsibility is it? Now, the knee-jerk reaction is, it's the restaurant's responsibility because they were on company time. I bet a high-powered attorney could lobby that, no, the state is liable because the state makes you follow these rules to get the booze from point A to point B.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure who's liable, but I do really want to talk about the warehouse. Because I think part of it is why are things the way that they are right now? It's because they are that way, and it's hard to change them. And I think they identified a bunch of issues with this warehouse. There's two. One is in Clayton, one is in Raleigh. The second one is 77% empty.
Right.
And yet they're telling these distillers, there's not enough room for you, so we got to kick you out if you're not selling enough product. And so I think it's kind of
it's false.
The whole thing with the warehouse, I mean, it's arbitrary. The rules governing that are arbitrary. The fact that this is the delivery system, that everything has to be stored there is arbitrary. And I think it's just, for the state, it's it's just too difficult for them to think of how to change it. And all of those changes do have to come from the legislature. And it's going to take a long time. I mean, even now, they just went over all of these possible recommended changes that the Joint Oversight Committee is recommending, for the House to look into. But who knows if they're actually going to pick that up this session. It could be years before we actually see any reforms that are going to change the protocols for how liquor is stored and distributed in this state.
Right. So that bill in Asheville just completely got pummeled, and
they can't do anything. The legislature has to do it.
Didn't even come close to even passing. So,
I mean, and I think too, when you describe your interaction at the ABC store. I mean, there were over $1 billion in alcohol sales in the state last year. The state is making a lot of money. I think $430 million of that went into the general fund. So that's like paving your roads and stuff. Yet, this audit that they did last summer showed huge inefficiencies in how they're managing this warehouse and basically running this system, bleeding, upwards, I think, $14 million, just wasting that money and they know that they're not doing it in the most efficient way. It's just the question is, it's like they're doing it this way, so that's how they're doing it.
Well, it's a very fractured system, right? Like Virginia, for instance, it's a centralized control system, whereas North Carolina, even though it's labeled as a control state and it technically fits the definition, we're really more of a franchise state.
Yeah.
We have
They don't like that term, though. ABC doesn't like that term, franchise.
But it's what it is.
Yeah.
It's if you're looking at it strictly from a business model standpoint, it's a franchise system.
What does that? What's the difference between a franchise state and a control state?
Well, the franchise state, which is not an official term, it's just how we look at the way different businesses are structured, right? Like, look at McDonald's, right? There's not a corporate entity that controls every single branch of McDonald's.
Right.
It's owned by individual business owners who make their own decisions about what they want to do. It's heavily guided by the home office in Illinois. But each one of these business owners...
They tell you when the McRib is ready to come out.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean...
That's how liquor is run in North Carolina. There are 168 boards, and each one of them makes their own decisions about what products they're going to stock, how they want to lay their store out, whether they want to have consistent signage throughout their store, or they want to do something a little unique from store to store. All those decisions are made at a board level. Whereas in Virginia, if Virginia buys, say, 100 cases of my product, they probably would put it in 100 stores and see how it does. I don't have to get it listed and then go convince 100 stores to carry the product.
Right.
And that's a big difference.
Each board is different too, because they're actually decided by the voters. So it's not even like there's no consistency with whether or not they're on the county level or on the municipal level. Basically, voters referendum, do you want to sell alcohol here? And if it fails the county level, then it goes to a municipal level. So you have these niche, everybody's doing things differently based on that precinct, right? Things are being done really differently here in Wake County than, I don't know, just Bladen County, right? Every operation is very different. Every board has kind of different rules and nuances to it.
Well, and back to when you get fracturing of a market, you get inefficiencies. And so I think one of the proposals in the report that came out was to merge boards in counties that had multiple boards. And that I think will help with some of that efficiency. The other thing that they did is I think they actually had a recommendation to allow local boards to offer delivery for a charge. I don't know, again, if that's going to come about, but that was one of the recommendations that the...
Oh, man, I would, as a restaurant owner or a manager, I would pay that charge because I'm already paying my employee to leave for an hour. So I'm paying that person hourly to go do that.
And they're not getting their job done.
They're not getting their job done. I'm paying an extra hour to send someone else out to get whatever and bring it back. Meanwhile, I've got an empty bar or I've got to staff another person to be there. So it's like double, it's like twofold. Whereas if somebody could just drive it here, that would be great. And then think about that industry in itself. I mean, I happen to know that a lot of people have been talking about like what we would do if delivery for liquor became available. And there are already a lot of precedents or a lot of businesses ready to jump on that specific type of design. So if the law came out, you'd be looking at essentially almost like an Uber driver model where anyone could be that person. While businesses, restaurants could actually run the restaurant.
Sure, yeah.
If you listen to this show, you probably agree with us that North Carolina is a pretty amazing place. We have an emerging beer scene, countless chef-driven restaurants, craft cocktail bars that will even put Manhattan on their heels. That's right, Matt. I told you that. We're seeing the growth of all these really exciting restaurants, so let me tell you, every successful restaurant has one thing in common: a point-of-sale system that works for them. Cake is the point-of-sale system that lets bar and restaurant owners focus on their guest experience. Stop worrying about tracking every sale. Cake does that for you. You can automatically save information and review it later from anywhere. That means you can actually take days off and see your family. Wouldn't that be cool? To get started with Cake, check out trycake.com/NCFB. For our listeners, you can get $750 off the activation fee. That's a 75% discount. And with that discount, you get user-friendly point-of-sale solutions that include cloud reporting and world-class 24/7 support. So, restaurant owners, go to trycake.com/NCFB and take a look. Cake makes it easy. One would say it's a piece of cake. I said that.
Some of these recommendations are appropriate, I think, and they're good steps in the right direction. Again, I'm not 100% certain that privatization is the way to go. There are certainly modernizations that I think would be very positive for us, and making it easier for our restaurant customers, even if they're indirect customers, to get our products is one of the positive developments that I see coming out of this. The other thing I'd like to see is, I'd like to be able to sell more of our product at the distillery and, have a little – I've always been a firm believer that we should be able to sell our products, period. If we want to sell 100 bottles to a person, fine.
Right.
That they should be able to buy that. If a restaurant wants to buy it and they can't get it at their ABC store for whatever reason, they're out of stock, they don't carry it, whatever, give us a call. We should be able to deliver that and make that sale.
What about cocktails?
Cocktails, I'd love to be able to sell cocktails. My friends who own distilleries in other states, 40% of their revenue comes from selling cocktails. And I really don't understand why we can't sell cocktails or even provide cocktails at the distillery. Imagine this. You go to a brewery and you say, I'd like a sample of your beer. And the state law is you can have 2 ounces of this beer, and it's got to be served at 72 degrees Fahrenheit.
You can't mix it with anything.
Yeah. It's got to be.
Have fun with that gin.
Yeah. 72 degrees Fahrenheit for a beer. Nobody drinks beer that way, aside from some of the cask ales and things like that are meant to be served that way.
Even if it was cold, even if that regulation would probably at least allow them to refrigerate it.
Yeah.
But still, the point is, can anyone imagine going to a brewery and not being able to have a pint of beer?
Exactly.
That sounds ridiculous.
And Scott had a good point in your article.
Scott Maitland of Topo.
Yeah, that it took 20 years to get where it is. But we've already had some of that experience of what happens when these changes occur. We should learn from our experiences and know that if the public wants these things, we should be able to find ways to get it there.
And I think, too, the other thing with selling cocktails, it's a great way for you guys to be able to actually grow your brands. I mean, I think Rim was talking about there's almost like this chicken and egg thing where you're trying to get to the ABC board, but the board is like, we're not going to stock it if restaurants don't want it. Restaurants are like, we're not going to want it unless it's in the store. So how do you grow the brand and reach those people? Well, you create an environment or an ambiance, like you can walk into a craft brewery and yet have a place where people can hang out and say, oh, this is what this product is all about. How can you really experience a product if you have, what is it, the 2 ounces of, warm liquor?
Oh, it's a quarter of an ounce.
A quarter of an ounce of warm liquor.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And come on, your product, your rum is good. It's really good. But having it at room temperature without some ice, without maybe a little ginger ale, without just something.
Well,
who drinks just straight liquor, And so, right now I've got liquor.
Yeah,
I think we're all doing that right now.
Yeah, but we're using ice, and we even put a little bitters in there, right? But why can't we have fun? When I first moved to Raleigh, I went to the Topo distillery, and we did the whole tour. Actually, Matt Weiss, before he lived here, my counterpart, had our wives. We all went there. It was such a great experience. But then at the end, they're like, here you go, let's taste some wines or taste some liquor. And we all just had little samples, little tastes, and we looked at each other and we're like, what the hell's going on here? Why couldn't we just put this over a ginger ale or put this with some tonic or just put this on ice, shake it up and pour it, nice and neat the way you would do a normal martini? Because the laws say you can't do it. And it's like, but you're stifling the creativity of the craft itself. So that in itself doesn't help sustain the business.
They are creative, though. When I went to Topo, Esteban, who's the co-owner there, he actually did this thing where he poured, just generic vodka into a glass of milk, and then he poured his stuff. And he was like, look, the generic one, it curdles the milk, but our stuff doesn't. I was like, wow, that's a really creative way to sell your product because you can't do anything else with it. You can't actually let the person drink it.
Yeah. Milk was a bad choice right here. But let's think of this right now because you touched on a point about breweries, right? I was just talking to somebody who's writing an article coming out soon about there's a possibility that that our beloved breweries, or our tap rooms, these little craft beer bars, are now going to. There's a potential that we want to regulate them as liquor bars, where like private clubs, because they're not serving food, and that's right now the main thing. If you're Foundation across the street or Dram and Draft down the corner, they're a liquor bar. They don't have a kitchen, so they work as a private club, and you have to pay a membership and whatever. Well, now they're saying, well, these beer bars are kind of loopholing this whole thing because they started off as a retail shop, but then they were allowed to pour on premise. And now that they're pouring on premise, now it's just a straight up bar. People are just drinking beer all the time. So now do we need to regulate this? I don't understand the mentality, and I wish there was a fourth person in this room, and that fourth person was somebody that works for the actual ABC board.
They're not going to want to talk to you.
Oh, remember, beer is food.
Right, beer is food. So
there's
there
also food trucks at a lot of these breweries too.
Right.
So
if that was the case, like if Lassiter Distilling had Cousin's Maine Lobster out front, then he could pour cocktails? Is that what we're trying to say? I mean, it's such a crazy loophole and just silliness, but I think the idea is let's have a little less regulation. Let's start moving forward so that we can grow this industry, like you mentioned as the title of your entire story, Leigh. It's like we are about to hit this crazy boom of craft distillers coming out of North Carolina, which once was such a beloved state of spirit making, and went.
Underground
dark.
It was.
It's a little bit of a checkered past, but
how NASCAR got started.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
people were running hooch in really fast cars, getting away from the cops. But it also didn't stifle people from making moonshine and making whatever they wanted in their basements. But now that it's not illegal, now we're actually making really good products that can stand up to not just good for North Carolina, but good for liquor.
And I think it's a testament just how much this industry has grown with all of these challenges and obstacles. I think in 2010, there were 7 distilleries in the state of North Carolina, and now there's 81 that are permitted. One of the things that really stuck out to me talking to a lot of these distillers is they don't really make that much money. Like, they're in it because they really care
Gentry
about
does.
this.
He's loaded.
Okay.
Yeah,
Some of you guys make some money. But, people like Rim had to get a second job to, keep his business afloat because the margins just aren't there. You sell cocktails, you can charge $10 a glass, and you can get $150 or something from every bottle. But when you can only sell by the bottle, it really limits what your profit margins are, especially when the state is taking like 47% off of every bottle anyway.
And that's the funny part, too, is most people don't realize that restaurants and bars actually pay more money per bottle than what we pay as the general consumer. It's usually $4, $5, $6 more.
Because you have that mixed beverage tax,
Right, and so you're paying a tax because you're going to open this bottle and mix it with the ginger ale, so that costs more money apparently, which is weird because that's double taxation, right? You're buying a bottle, you're getting taxed on it, and then you're selling it to a customer, and that drink is getting taxed. So the same liquor is being taxed twice, which I thought that's why we threw a bunch of tea in the Boston Harbor a long time ago.
Oh, by the time it gets to the consumer, it's been taxed 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, you got your bailment charge, you have your excise charge, which is 30%, you have the 7% sales tax,
I always just grew up being in California knowing that I could buy a bottle of something that the liquor store would sell for $30 for $20 at the restaurant, and then make a bunch of profit off of it. That's the way we do business, right? That's what wholesaling is all about. You buy in quantity, and then you get a better price. But out here, that's not the case. You actually spend more money, which then goes back to the idea of not buying anything in case anymore. You just buy bottles because you're not getting a case break or a discount for spending more money on it. They don't even allow that. If they allowed, hey, if you buy a case, you're going to get it for $2 less a bottle, well, then that might drive the industry a little bit to do that. But we're still paying top dollar and an extra $4 or $5 on a bottle for any restaurant that wants to have it. What's going on, people? Why is it so broken?
And I guess, Gentry, how much more do you think your business would be able to make if you could sell, if you could spread your bottles thinner and sell cocktails out of that? Would that make a big difference for you guys?
I think it would. It's hard to say. We haven't run the numbers yet, but knowing what I know about what my friends in other states do, we could probably estimate that we'd probably at least be able to grow our business by half
Did your personal business, did it positively turn when the brunch bill passed and you were allowed to sell 5 bottles as opposed to 1?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was very important for us you know, to improve our numbers.
So that was a help to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Now, do you have problems where people want to buy more than 5 and you have to tell them no?
Yeah, especially around the holidays.
Right.
As you said, that's when everyone buys booze.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets that they've already bought 2 or 3 bottles from us, and they come in and they say, I've got 5 family members I want to buy product for.
Yeah.
And I say, well, you can get 2. And, they kind of, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy. Fortunately, our business is right up the street from an ABC store, so they can go down there and get it, and it's usually pretty well stocked. But it is a problem sometimes, more during the holidays than other times of the year. But we also get people from out of state who want to stock up. They come in, see us, they taste it, then they come back a year later or a couple months later even, and they say, like, we want to get, 6 bottles. And we say, well, we can't do that,
Why couldn't you just ship to
Colorado? Shipping's another issue.
You couldn't ship a case of booze to Colorado.
Couldn't ship anything.
Oh,
couldn't
yeah, no,
ship
you
one
can't.
bottle.
You can't ship anything. And I mean, that was part of the thing, too, with, RIM's product Krupnikas. It's like a specialty thing that Lithuanians really like, right?
Yeah.
But,
It's
like,
delicious.
if you're a Lithuanian in Colorado, you're like, how can I get this product? And it's like, you can't.
Yeah, we're only allowed to ship it to people who have valid wholesalers permits in other states. So I can ship it to a distributor, and we do business with other distributors outside of the state, but can't ship it to people, and that's a problem. We should be able to change that.
Well, the music's playing. It's time to say goodbye. Leigh, thank you very much for coming in. Gentry, thank you very much. Give a shout out to your podcast because you have one coming out.
Oh, yeah, we do. IndyCast, check it out. We're on the podcast apps. And yeah, we actually interviewed Rim Vilgelis for this. And check out our article at indieweek.com.
I love it. And go to Nightdale.
Yeah, check us out, 319 North 1st Avenue, LassiterDistilling.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.